General Elphinstone tried to negotiate with the Afghans. The Afghans offered him safe passage, provided the British handed over their heavy weapons and retreated immediately to India. It must have felt like an impossible decision. If the garrison tried to stay, they could starve and be wiped out. But if they were to retreat, could they really trust the assurances of their enemy? I faced a similar dilemma, on a smaller scale, when I was the deputy governor in the south of Iraq after the invasion in 2004. Our compound was under siege. We were being attacked by Sadr's militia. And their commander came to us and said that if we agreed to leave our weapons and hand ourselves over to him, he would take us safely out of the fort and back. At the time, I thought it was a trick. It was a trick to massacre us. And I felt, again, the same thing when I read this history. In Iraq, we stayed and defended the compound, but the British in Kabul in 1841 were deeply divided. Many young officers were determined to fight on, but Elphinstone overruled them and ordered a retreat. All the troops, their wives and children, were forced to leave the relative safety of their compound and to try and reach the British garrison in Jalalabad, 9 days' march east of Kabul. They made painfully slow progress, and after 2 days this straggling column of soldiers and civilians met their fate beneath this mountain. This valley is the jaws of hell. Into this, in midwinter, the cream of the British Army marched, and they were treated as though they were in a slaughterhouse. By the time they reached this valley, Horde Kabul, they had spent 2 nights out in the open in 3-foot snow in temperatures of -15 without tents, waking up to discover frozen corpses around them. They staggered into this valley, starving, frozen, with no supplies and 80 miles to go, and it was at that point that the attack began. Behind every boulder was an Afghan with a musket, taking careful aim, able to pick off individually 3,000 people and kill them as they made their way through the valley. And it continued not just for 1 or 2 miles, but for 5 miles of a ravine. By the time they reached the end of that valley, 90% of the British Army had been extinguished. A handful of soldiers managed to fight their way through, but only to meet their fate later.
What we've got here is the last stand of the 44th Foot at Gundamuk. 50 men make it to the village of Gundamuk. They stand on this low hill and they have run out of ammunition. They're relying only on their bayonets. And the picture we see here is half of them are dead and the Pathans are about to close in and end it with their swords.
Of the 17,000 men, women and children who'd set out 9 days earlier from Kabul, only one made it to the British garrison in Jalalabad.
One man has made it on from there. There's Dr. Brydon. And in this picture, Dr. Brydon is sitting on his old nag, about to collapse. And he is seen limping towards Jalalabad. And they assume he's only the first of thousands of troops to make it through. And the gates are opened and a party is sent out. And they realize he's the only one. And that night, the commanding officer orders the bugles to be sounded all night. The wind was blowing very strongly that night. And rather than billowing out into the plain of Jalalabad, it blew back into the town. And he said that the noise of the trumpets echoing amid the wail of the winds sounded like an elegy to the dead army.
The British Empire never had and never would experience a defeat like it.
First Afghan War was a major event for the Afghans. We always see it through our perspective as the great imperial disaster. But for the Afghans, this was their Trafalgar, their Battle of Britain, their Waterloo, all in one. They were the only non-colonial power to see off a modern westernized army in the 19th century, on the sort of magnificent scale that they did, and completely destroy an entire Victorian army at the very peak of Britain's power.